It being just a little past 6 p.m., I'll go ahead and call the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors Special Order Session for September 13th to order. If all members could please press their attend buttons and silence all cell phones. Next item on the agenda, if you could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Supervisor Locke. Now the invocation by Supervisor Locke.
We come to you asking for your blessings and help as we are gathered together this evening. Show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Supervisor Locke. Next item on the agenda is a motion to adopt this evening's agenda. For that, I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht.
I move to adopt this evening's agenda.
There's a motion and a second to adopt this evening's agenda. Any discussion or changes? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, and that is a time on the agenda in which we allow the public to speak on anything on this evening's agenda or anything under county jurisdiction. Is there anyone who wishes to speak this evening? Is there anyone who wishes to speak this evening? I'll say one last time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that portion of the agenda, and we'll move right on to reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any reports from any committees, commissions, and boards? I'll call on Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to inform everybody that today I had about a 45-minute visit with Supervisor Robel. He's in real good spirits, looks very well, misses us all, and can't wait to get back, he says. He's raring to go.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschlager. Any other reports from commissions or boards? Supervisor Albrecht?
I didn't push my button.
I apologize. I'll call next on Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Past Saturday, I and Supervisor Binder attended the Monk Festival in Oshkosh. It was very well attended, and they were very pleased. Had a very large crowd, and it was very interesting. We were VIPs. I was interested in that. Got to see some of the culture, and maybe next year I would encourage many of you to be there if you can. And the other thing, I had the clerk send around an event. There's a group called Fill the Gap in Oshkosh, which is trying to fill gaps for people who are in poverty. They're having 2 events later this month. If you're interested in helping people and learn more, I would encourage you to attend it. It was a flyer that I had the clerk send to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's County Board Chairman's Report. Just one item, and that's excusals for this evening. We do have a number of folks who asked to be excused this evening. That includes Supervisor Robo, Supervisor Weiss, Supervisor Gabbert, Supervisor Shorsey, Supervisor Powers, Supervisor Warnke, Supervisor Fari, and Supervisor Rasmussen. And that concludes. Oh, I believe he had planned not to make it, if I remember. Wonderful. Glad to have you, Supervisor Weiss. All right. And that concludes my report, so we'll move right on down to the rest of the agenda. We have 4 presentations this evening. The first one is in regards to a summary of the Winnebago County Parks Economic Impact Study. For that, we have Trish Now from East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, as well as our Parks Director, Rob Way. If you could please step to the podium to your right. Please go right ahead and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. It's my pleasure to present to the County Board the Parks Department's Impact Study. It's something I've mentioned a couple times in past presentations that we were putting one together, and that started back in 2015 at the urging of the Parks Committee. We wanted to gauge some of the things that we were doing at the Parks Department, some of the economic value, some of the social value that we bring to the community. And at that time, it was decided right off the bat that we bring East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission to produce this study, and Trish now has been the lead person on that. She's done a wonderful job. It's been a pleasure coordinating another project with her. She's done several of projects with us in the past and is continuing to do that even now. And before she does that summary, or provides you with the high points of the summary, what we did was break it down into 3 phases. If you've gone through the instrument, you can see that phase 1 involved looking at our nature area and our trail system. Then we broke off from there, taking a look at the community park as phase 2. The park is such a neat environment. It offers a lot to the community with not only its assets, but it has a great deal of economic value with the tournaments, the amount of activities that take place in there, and that was worth studying as well. And then finally was the Expo Center as phase 3. And if you recall, about 5 months ago, we came before the county board and presented some of the details on that. Trish will go over that in a little bit of detail, but again, this is a summary. This is putting this all together and our impact and how we affect the community from both an economic and a social standpoint. So with that, before Trish gets up here, does anybody need we have a hard copy of the study? Or you're all set? Yep, good. Anybody else? Do you have an extra one? You have an extra one, otherwise I'm short. Yeah, I have 4 total. 5.
As long as it stays there. I can give her after.
Yeah, I need yours.
I'll probably need mine for later.
Yeah, she'll need hers for right now. We'll give it to you at the end. Go ahead, Trish.
You're done? Okay. Yeah, thank you guys for having me back. As Rob said, we had put together 3 phases of the economic impact study from 2015 to 2019. So it's basically 4 years of surveys, 4 years of work, and just really wanted to give you guys really a good summary, all the data and everything that we had come up with through the surveys itself. So really we started this off, specific objectives. We wanted to look at, what was the satisfaction out there by doing these SNAP surveys, the value and the impact. So, what is that economic data over the 3 to 4 years for the county parks and the expo and the trails and everything else that you guys have out there? We summarized a lot of the online SNAP surveys of the visitors. We showed the value, basically just a sampling of the people that live within the county, but it really did give us a good aspect of really what was out there and what the county parks are bringing to the economic base. We reviewed some of the basic concepts. You have a lot of communities within the county, so we wanted to take a look at that. And then just an estimate of an overall impact of the visitors. So the Visitors Bureau, we got a lot of data from them, the public, everything out there from all the 3 phases of the study. And this is really, the nuts and bolts of it. Phase 1, we came out May, September to 2015, 175 participants, but we had a really good completion rate. Vicki from the Parks Department, Vicki Redlin, went out and gathered a bunch of volunteers on the trails and had them fill out the survey. So, a lot of that was compiled and put together into the phase 1. Phase 2, we looked at just the community park. We wanted to see what the visitors are out there. And that was 2017 to 2018. So we ran that from May to September. These were all done through online SurveyMonkey. 305, so we still had a pretty good, completion rate. Sporting events, basic visitors that were staying within the area at the soccer tournaments and different things that were going on, the rugby players. And then phase 3, which is the last report that I gave you guys, and that was March 1st. That should be 2019 in there, a little typo, but we did run that for a year, 748 participants, 65% completed that rate. But we did have a lot of participants for that particular survey, which was great. We wanted to look at all of the concentration of the events, what the visitors were bringing in, what their spending habits were, how much were they spending on gas, grocery, accommodations. Everything really went into that study. So just kind of an overview here. You'll see that actually on page 4 of your study. We separated this all out, put all the 3 phases together, but it really benefits everything. And the top 6 is really what I came up with when I looked at this after the 4 years. So the county parks are really a community. You're bringing that social aspect in. You're getting people off the couch. You're getting the kids out there to be active. So it really does even increase that. Individual health with the natural way out there. The quality of life. Adults are actually working out with their kids now. It's great. You have all the trails. The boat launches, the fish. You have passive and active recreation out there. It's great as far as a benefit there. And then the economic, which is really what the study wanted to show. You are attracting investment. You are adding to that tourism base. And that's really what we discovered here. The tourism attractions alone. You have the county fairgrounds with the expo. You have Life Fest. You have all these different events that are going on within the county itself. So you are attracting people to the area. And then even increasing of the property values. So your tax base, by having all of these amenities, are increasing that tax base, which the communities love and everybody else out there. So anytime you're close to a park or trail, that's going to increase your property values out there. And then also the environmental. So you're looking at the water quality out there, the air quality, habitat. Any green space is going to act like a filter out there to help out with that. So I'm not, I don't have to go through a whole lot of detail here. You do have the report in front of you. These were just a lot of the highlights. One big thing that came out of the 2015 when we first started that is the money invested really within the Park and Rec Department services really do not belong to the county though. They belong to the people you're serving, the taxpayers, the residents, everybody out there. So really that's the service that you're providing. On average, these were 2014 statistics, 2015. So you're looking at $11.90 per taxpayer. That's probably gone up since then. Regional average is about $12.90. And I just pulled this today. A city of 4,000 typically spends about $18 to $22 per taxpayer. But of course, you're looking at a smaller base. With inside there, you have a lot more facilities. And then, just going through the survey, 40% said they spent more than 100. Just going on the parks and the trails while they were in the area. 67% said they had visited the county facility before. Free outdoor exercise. Hey, everybody likes free outdoor exercise. Can't beat that. Why spend money at a gym, right? Got that there. 91%. That was very important, I thought, when we did the study. And then we did have our bike and pedestrian coordinator do some trail counters out there. And a lot of that data is really all in your appendices and in the packet itself, so you can actually review those if you wish. Phase 2, that was your community park, top 5, trails, dog park, picnic areas, events, parties, playgrounds. That's what people want. So that's what we've kind of discovered out there when we did the survey. 72% that visited just the park were spending that $25 to $50 a day. And the other 28% were actually spending higher than that. just visiting the park and going to those events. So say you have a soccer tournament, people are spending the money within the area. You know, they're spending money on that gas or whatever just to get there. So to increase the value of what Community Park has to offer, I came up with, I guess, 3 things here. Commit to your performance management. Best practices are always a good thing for engaging the user. Natural Way is actually working out very well. You create a culture of innovation. So, you know, again, the Natural Way and everything else that you guys got going within the park itself. And then develop that measurement system. What is the user getting for those tax dollars that are being paid for? So it was a very good study, I thought, and very overall neat and packaged as far as what Community Park is actually offering. And then, again, it's just the key highlights from the expo. You know, the purpose there, again, was just to look at the user's perception. What was the social economic impacts of all the events, tourism, you know, and then we kind of compared these results with those of the attendees. And then came up with a lot of the key highlights. You know, you're looking at 95% visitor rate, Life Fest in there. You know, it was very surprising. You only had a third that were actually coming as a first visit. So, you know, that's great. When you start thinking about it, you got a third people within that, just that sampling. That's not even counting all the rest of the people that were there. You know, and over 50% staying for that weekend. Getting their info from social media, you got 10 events, they attended at least more than one, so you had 2.65, and they were just in the county for just that event, 68% said that. So this is just a good sampling as far as what they were spending their money on. You had shopping, dining, the gasoline, the groceries, obviously your hotel and gas were the bigger expenses out there. You know, and then you start looking at how many of the dollars they were spending, just kind of looking at those numbers, you know, and this is just from the sampling, of course, but, you know, that's a pretty good chunk of change. You know, you got 70,000 there just from the hotel, another 69,000 from hotel, you know, just from the dining or staying in an RV, you know, and the gas and everything else that kind of goes into effect there. And this is pretty surprising though too when you're starting to look at where the demographics are. So you are targeting, you know, mostly people in Wisconsin, but then you start looking at, well, we are pulling visitors from out of state too. So it's really good. You know, the trends are showing an increased attendance rate all the time. And, you know, the value of what the expo is bringing to the county is a very good thing. And that's really what we've discovered with a lot of the impact with the surveys and different things that we've done. So just to kind of conclude here a little bit, you know, this is pretty quick overview. A lot of it's, you know, in there, a lot of numbers, different things like that. We kind of looked at maybe, you know, looking at that SWOT analysis in there. What are the strengths? What are the opportunities? You know, we did have accessibility in there. You did have the Fox Cities Market, so they were close by. The unique attractions just in the Oshkosh area besides the county itself. Short driving distances. The quantity, variety. You know, there's so many different events that people are really looking forward to every single year and coming back. And the accommodations within the county. Great marketing. Every time you turn around, there's a new market as far as a new event being marketed, or you hear something on the radio, hey, I want to go to that. That sounds really cool. And then looking at the county facilities from the tourism base, but, you know, you added 254 million. I mean, that's pretty good, considering. I mean, you look at Dane County and some of the other ones that are in there, but Winnebago County is pretty much right up there. You know, it's just some of the weaknesses that we were kind of looking at. Again, you know your limitations, but you're a county. I mean, walking distance to the event, you are far and few between. You know, the expo, obviously people want to glamp this time around, so just camp. So they want full hookups. With their RVs, you know, they want the whole electric and the water. And then we looked at, you know, what was the local versus the out of town. Most people were coming in that, you know, live pretty close by. And then just perceptions of the select event. You know, what was the appeal out there? You know, is there some other marketing that can actually pull in a different tourism base besides the ones that are actually even coming? And then, of course, you always have competition. I mean, even from the Milwaukee area besides the Fox Valley area coming in. But, yeah, I mean, it was a very good study. That's pretty much a lot of the stuff that we've learned, but as far as getting the data and throwing it all together, it was a lot of fun actually doing these surveys. So learned a lot with that, but it's pretty much all I have. Unless you guys have some questions or comments or anything else on that.
Thank you for that information. We'll open it up for any questions or comments. I see Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, question I have is, when you see this analysis of what has been recorded, my question is, are the facilities that we have adequate for 5, 10, 20 years down the road? I know that we've kind of been muddling our way through expansion. You pick up a piece of property here, pick up another piece of property there to put the puzzle together. But in the overall plan for the needs of the growth of the county and the expected increase in tourism, which is promoted by the municipalities in Winnebago County as well as by the state. What's the forecast
Well, that's
in
probably
the
better-
crystal ball?
Yep. And I think that's actually better answered even with the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan that we just accomplished too. We did a complete needs assessment of all the facilities and based that on your population data. And I can tell you from that plan itself, you guys are right on target for what it is. The main thing is to look at the maintenance and everything else as far as what's coming in. And maybe Rob can answer this question a little bit better than me. But
Oh, go ahead if you're.
no, it's
Yeah,
good. Go
she's
ahead.
actually, kind of was a lead-in to where I was going to take that, and sure, we can adjust and attempt to grow for what's coming in, but most importantly, we do have that maintenance need. And if you've noticed on the CIP plan, we've been inserting quite a few things in the plan. It's been growing and they're expo-centered primarily, and you'll see a few more added to that list. And that is a top concern. We do have needs. I think when you did the tour out there, I mentioned that there is a major improvement we need to make to our hard surface areas. It's still the original. We simply cut and paste, so to speak, to what we do have, but really there needs to be a lot of attention driven to what we do have. Although Trish did mention there are some needs in order to accommodate some of the events we're trying to draw, and a lot of that concerns our camping. We need to put a lot more services in if we're going to address that. And if we don't, there's always a chance of losing that. That's an important part, and those people are looking for quality services, particularly the type of demographics that we attract out at the expo, the glamping and so forth. So it's kind of a balancing act. We try to do that within our parks budget as much as we can, but certainly there are going to be things coming over on the CIP that are what I consider some big ticket items.
Well, are you coordinating with the city of Oshkosh? Because if my understanding is correct, you are within the city of Oshkosh? Or you're not?
We have a lot of conversations. Actually, that property purchase that we recently made, we kind of wanted to get the input from the city, what they're going to be bringing out to the north end, to make sure it kind of coincides with what we're looking at, what they're looking at, so we're not in conflict. Beyond that, as far as the recreational facilities, I think we fill a niche out there with the community park in particular that we're not trying to match. We're trying to not duplicate what the city has going.
Well, what I hear you saying that you're concerned with reconstructing and adding more impervious surfaces. You've got a balance there because there's a major concern at the present time within the solid waste department and the city of Oshkosh requirements that they attribute to the DNR. And I would hate to see the Parks Department go down that road without having a substantial blueprint, taking into account what the heck the city wants from us.
Nope, that's being addressed as we're updating our Expo master plan. That plays a huge part in it, so that's being taken into account.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Konetsky, followed by Supervisor Lenz.
Mr. Chairman, say, Rob, you mentioned some of the things you answered already for me. As far as the update on the Expo Center, or on your wish list, what would that be?
Well, we're working in to our master plan, which is due to be completed within the next couple of months. One of the major things is, again, the improvements, the impervious surfaces that need to be added. One item is another barn facility. Tricia had added that we are growing. Some of those events, they're going strong. They are expanding. They're bringing in more clientele from outside the area, particularly the horse shows. And the intent was to address the need for another barn and probably work in with that. We have no workshop proper on that site, so we tried to do that some years ago. We would hope to work that into that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Konetsky. Next speaker, Supervisor Lenz, followed by Supervisor Binder.
All right, thank you for the presentation. I just had a quick question in regards to the weaknesses. Were you guys able to identify one or two that we would be able to take on and try to work with to maybe move it into the strength column next time?
There, sure. Anyone that you particularly had in mind, other than maybe the RV camping spots, but I think that we've kind of looked at a little bit.
That is what we're working on, always working on.
Well,
Yeah.
now that you mentioned, I do have a side something on that one. But no, I was just wondering if in general, if you looked at any of those, say, for example, the competition venues with the Fox Valley area, or any of those where you said, hey, this is one we could probably tackle. But in regards to the RVs, did we ever investigate possibly extending it beyond events for camping so we can justify costs?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did do that, but that entails the makeup of an actual campground. And with our type of operation, it doesn't bode well. You almost need around-the-clock servicing if you're going to run a campground. We found that out several years ago, probably for a period of 5 years. We did it, and we ran into a lot of problems with people who came on site, either left early, didn't pay, didn't know the parameters of where they needed to be and so forth. It more caused a conflict than anything else. They need somebody on site really to supervise a campground if you're going to run one.
But in general, were there any of these weaknesses that you guys think you might be able to take on as a challenge?
I will say it kind of works in that direction. We're trying to find new ways to market ourselves, to get again, we are literally international. We do have conventions, have had international conventions. We're looking at another one coming in. So we're trying to expand our base, trying to get out to the organizations that, such as in the entertainment industry, to get something into the stadium. We've done a broad scope look at all types of people who would use that, all type of organizations, and we're just doing a blanket send-off of our marketing material across the board. So we're trying to expose ourselves, get our name out there more and more. Certainly, if anybody has any ideas, sometimes it's kind of that small little idea that comes in that can really be a bonus. So we're open-minded.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Buck.
I guess one of my main concerns is our shelters. Our shelters are basically getting run down, and with only 2 full-time workers, it's really hard to maintain them. The city of Oshkosh has been building new shelters, basically 1 or 2 a year, and ours are pretty much obsolete, run down, rotten boards. The bathrooms are old. So, I would think if we have some extra money in the future, like we're finally gonna get that soccer shelter put back up, which it's been about 2.5 years. All our shelters are in need of repairs, and you need more people in that Parks Department in order to be able to do that. You have nobody, the boards are rotting on them, they need to be painted, they're all run down. And, if from my perspective, where would I wanna rent? I'll rent a new one from the city of Oshkosh, if it's available, and I'll take yours as a second choice. But we have a beautiful park, but we need to basically invest in the shelters so that people can start using them a little more.
It's a good lead into, if you look at the CIP plan, it has been put on that. And once again, those are big ticket items, but yeah, Supervisor Bender is right. They are in bad need of replacement. Certainly, maybe it's worth a tour, possibly. But yeah, it's being addressed, and I hope it would pass when it is brought up.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Rob and Trish, for this presentation. Looking at the Expo Center fees, how do you assess that, and do you take a map around the state or the East Central region? I guess is my understanding that it's pretty reasonable to rent the Expo Center out. I guess, how do you assess those fees?
Mine. That one's mine. We do. When we are prepared to adjust those, if you recall, we come before the board every 1 or 2 years now with an adjustment. Prior to that, we've typically done our study around the area. Problem is, it's not really possible to compare apples to apples. The closest comparison we have is Fair Park down in West Bend. And even then, it's difficult because facilities just don't compare. They don't have the covered arena and so forth that we have, so it's difficult. We start sidetracking too much, and it's difficult to get a fix on numbers. So what we do is we've looked at, we question, we talk to our clientele, where are things at? That's one of our best feeds. Obviously, they're going to say that it's too low or too high. So we do take them into account. However, if you recall, just recently, we kind of did an assessment. Recently, we're starting to nudge towards what the Dane County Center is. Help me. Alliant. The Alliant. And the Alliant is far above us in what they offer for assets and so forth. So we were starting to get into that territory. If you recall, we've mentioned to it in our last adjustment, we've had to back off. So right now, we're kind of planed out for another 2 years, and we'll be looking at an increase.
Just one more question on the swimming beach out there. What's the status of that? Is it going to reopen at some point, or what does that look like for the future?
Well, a study was done by a committee back 6-7 years ago and looking at the feasibility of would it be a smart move for the county to reopen it, to continue with what was happening around the area, particularly with Pollock Pool coming back online. And in all honesty, it was a good thing we didn't bring it back because Omro and even Pollock I don't want to say they're suffering, but their numbers are not near what it would take to support a facility like that. We found with our study that it was costing $7 per person that would walk in. That was taking revenue into account. So with that taken in mind, what it took to staff it, particularly with what's happening now, even guards are hard to come by. A lot of places they're struggling. We've stayed away from it. What we do look to do with it is convert it into more of a nature-based area, probably pull out the fence around it someday and have a walking path around it and open up as another fishing pond.
Have you looked at as possibly for a dog park or a dog swimming beach in there? I know that's been brought up a
Well, we
number
do
of
do
times.
that,
Okay.
3 times a summer.
Oh.
It is done. There is our best friends group that does, they just got done this past Sunday with their last one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll close that portion of the agenda. Thank you both very much for the information presentation this evening. Next item on the agenda is a presentation in regards to the sexual assault services in Winnebago County. For that, we have here Mary Ann Radley from Reach Counseling. Mary Ann, please.
Oh, I don't think I do. Good evening, everybody. It doesn't look like my laptop is going to connect to the screen, but you have the presentation that I'm going to be going through, so you can follow along with me. I just won't have it enlarged. There are some slides that have smaller type, so we'll do our best to get through it. But yeah, I'd just like to thank you all for having me here tonight. Like Shiloh said, I am going to talk about Reach Counseling and just the services that we provide to the community. Is this loud enough? Can everyone hear me okay? All right. So just so I have an understanding, can I get a show of hands of how many folks have not heard of Reach? Is everyone familiar with us? Okay, that's great. So I'm going to go over just in more detail the services that we provide in Winnebago County so that you all have an understanding of the work that we do, and then happy to take questions after my presentation. So, sounds like you all are pretty much aware that REACH is the sexual assault service providing agency for Winnebago County. That is really the focus of our services. All of our services that we provide in some way revolve around this issue. We provide services under the Sexual Assault Service Agency. We're also a licensed mental health clinic, which allows us to provide long-term mental health outpatient services, long-term therapy. We bill insurance for those services as well. So that side really operates as a full-fledged licensed clinic. We have locations in Neenah and Oshkosh just so that we're accessible to the entire county and reduce transportation barriers for folks. And we are the state-recognized sexual assault service provider for Winnebago County with the Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Assault. So WCASA, as we call it, is kind of the umbrella agency for the state of Wisconsin, and they have a number of state-recognized SASPs, or sexual assault service providers, and REACH is the agency in Winnebago County that provides those services. And we have been around in one way, shape, or form since 1975, so we've been doing this work for quite a long time. So what we do is provide comprehensive programming for complex trauma survivors in Winnebago County. So now when I say complex trauma, what I'm talking about is long-term invasive trauma, things like sexual abuse, things like domestic violence, not, something such as getting into a car accident, which is certainly traumatic. We're talking about interpersonal violence that occurs over a span of years. We do that, we address those needs and those issues through our therapy and advocacy programs for victims and families. We are also in nearly every school in Winnebago County. I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. And we do serve offenders of sexual assault as well. So this next slide with the map of Wisconsin was one that I was really hoping you'd be able to see up on the screen. But this talks about the ACE study. Is anyone familiar with the ACE study, or anyone not familiar with the ACE study? Most of you? Okay. So what ACE stands for is Adverse Childhood Experiences. And this is an incredible study that was done in the 90s by the Kaiser Permanente group when they started to find correlations between trauma in childhood and long-term physical and mental health problems. So what this map is showing us is the number of the percentage of folks in every county who have experienced 4 or more of these adverse childhood experiences. So 4 or more of these 10 traumas that they lay out as adverse in childhood. So if you can read it on your slide, you can see that the surrounding counties, I chose Outagamie and Calumet, they have less than 10% of their population that have experienced 4 or more ACEs, whereas Winnebago County has more than 20% of our population that's experienced 4 or more of these adverse childhood experiences. My source for this is the Children's Trust Fund with Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, just to let you guys know where I'm pulling that number from. And the reason we look at the number 4, so why is 4 significant, is that's what's really kind of thought of as the tipping point. So, you know, people can be resilient. People are very resilient, right? So 1, 2, 3 ACEs, you can get some help, you can get some work, but once you're hitting number 4, 5, 6, certainly we see people who've had all 10, that's when risk of early death starts to creep in. Risk of early death due to suicide because of all the harm that's been done to them, or risk of early death because of these physical and mental health problems that are a result of these traumas. So just to give you a picture of what our county looks like in terms of traumatic experiences. The next one, again, type is pretty small, but I just pulled a sample of a few of the ACEs, and this is just to give you, again, an idea of who are the folks that are coming to REACH and what have they been through. So what we've done is taken the ACE survey, and we've started to give it to every one of our clients who's age 18 or older, since this study, the ACE study, looks at childhood trauma. We want to see what are our adult clients coming in to our agency with? What are they holding with them? So I chose the 3 questions on here that measure emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, and I compared the Wisconsin average to what we see at REACH. So you can see for emotional abuse, the Wisconsin average reports that 29% of people report experiencing emotional abuse, whereas REACH's average is 58%. Physical abuse, the Wisconsin average is 17%, the REACH average is 47%, and then sexual abuse, the Wisconsin average is 11% of people reporting they've experienced it, and then the REACH average is 49%. So it's not surprising that we do see the numbers higher with the REACH average because we do identify and we advertise as a trauma clinic. So we're not seeing people come in that are just kind of like the worried well, as we kind of say sometimes. You know, they're stressed out because of a situation in their life. We're seeing people that are really carrying a lot of this trauma with them. So I'm going to go over the different services that we provide in a little more detail to give you an understanding of the work that we do. So the advocacy program is my program. I'm the director of the advocacy program at REACH, and what we do is provide 24/7 response for sexual assault survivors as well as their friends and family members. So that can look like legal, medical, personal advocacy, and the difference between those are, for legal, we frequently are working with individuals to help them gain access to the police. Maybe they're interested in going to make a police report, they don't know how to get that process started, and they really don't want to go by themselves. REACH advocates are all trained to work with the law enforcement agencies in Winnebago County. We accompany them to the police department, and we will assist them in making that statement. And then if we're going through the court process, a REACH advocate will walk that process with them. In fact, just this morning, I was in this building wrapping up with a client of mine whose daughter had been assaulted, and she said, "I never would have gone through this if I didn't have you here." So it's really important for people to not feel alone. This is a big intimidating space, right? So we just do what we can to provide support throughout those difficult times in people's lives when they're trying to navigate these systems. That goes for medical as well. A lot of times after an assault, people need medical attention. So when someone comes in for an exam, a forensic exam, the nurses in Winnebago County, we work primarily with Aurora, they call REACH any time of the day or night, weekend, weekday, and an advocate will respond, whether it's at noon, 5 o'clock, 2 a.m. We'll go to the hospital and we will be at that person's side, giving them support, letting them know that we have resources that can support them through this process. And we make sure we have 24/7 coverage with the use of a volunteer program. So I have volunteers that help us provide that night and weekend coverage. Other, within the advocacy program, other specialized programming we have are services for victims of trafficking. We do have programming for culturally responsive programming for the Latino and Native American populations in our community, which certainly experience sexual violence differently than the majority of folks that live here. We have an advocate at the UW Oshkosh campus to work with students. And then many of you may be aware of the initiative that was just unveiled a couple years ago to address the backlog of sexual assault kits. So we had an advocate working on that project as well, working with us under a 2-year grant, and her position is almost up, but she has been working with someone who had made a report 11 years ago now, and because of her kit being tested 10 years later, they were able to get a charge out of that case, and her trial will be at the end of the month. So that is one thing that she's been working on. We have a number of support groups. I have them listed here. Support groups are just a great way for REACH to provide more services for sexual assault survivors, and are a great way for women and men and folks in our community who have experienced sexual abuse to not feel so isolated and stigmatized. So they really can build a great support network, feel less alone, have developed coping skills and support systems outside of their professional therapeutic work. And I note on here that clients of REACH can, and they often do, utilize multiple different services within the organization. So people can be coming to my support group, working with someone else for legal advocacy, going through court, and then also seeing a therapist. So they can receive all of those services from individuals under one roof, which is really incredible. For our education program, real briefly, what we do in Winnebago County is we are in nearly every school in our county. So I'm not sure which ones we aren't in, but I think it's 70 or more than 70 schools that our educators go into. And what they do is they just visit every classroom, K to 12, and talk about age-appropriate information related to this stuff. So they talk about safe and unsafe touch. They talk about how, who's a safe adult that you can talk to if you have a problem. As you get a little older, they talk about healthy relationships and what those look like. They talk about the issue of consent, what the law is around sexual assault, especially when we're getting into high school. So that's the education that they provide. And then I want to touch on our therapy and our counseling program. So at REACH, we currently have 5 full-time and 1 part-time therapist, and their expertise is in treating chronic and complex trauma. So I talked about what we mean by complex trauma, people that are really carrying around a lot of stuff and have been sometimes for quite a while. I always think of one of my support group members who sadly passed away earlier this year, but she experienced decades of abuse and didn't ever come to receive services or open up to a professional until she was well into her 60s. So people really do carry this around for a long time, and sometimes we are that first point of contact. We have therapists who are trained. The goal is to have all of them trained in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, or TFCBT. Right now, there are 2 therapists, I believe 2 therapists trained in it, and 2 are going through the training. It takes about a year to complete. And what that is an evidence-based, structured model that integrates the whole family. So all the safe family members are brought into this process, teaches coping skills, and I should say too, it's for clients that are 18 and under. So it's modeled for children and family. So it talks about coping skills, it helps to process the trauma, and it works to enhance the resiliency of the victim. But just to give you an idea of some of our numbers, so in 2018, we provided 1,913 hours of counseling to 161 Winnebago County residents. 37 of those folks were age 12 and under, and we're lucky enough to be able to provide services for child victims 12 and under free of charge. So just to remove those financial barriers for families is extremely important to make sure that they get that treatment they need so that they don't carry this trauma with them throughout their lives. So what that equals to is 384 hours of therapy. And when we are working with minor clients, oftentimes there is a parent brought into that equation as well, but we're not typically counting them in our list or in our numbers. But just know that if we do have a minor listed here, we're typically working with at least one, if not both of the parents. 2 of our therapists do have specialty in doing adult and adolescent offender treatment as well. So we don't currently have groups running with our sex offender program, but we are doing individual work with referrals we get for offenders. And then this is one I also really wish that I could have big on the screen for you, but this is just some information about our revenue. So where are we getting our funds? And this is 2019 to date. So the pie chart's a little hard to read, I know, on your slide, but hopefully you can make out the what I've written on the side. So you can see that the main sources so far this year are from government grants and from both the Oshkosh and Fox Cities United Way. I'll give you guys a minute or two to kind of look at that before I move on. That really completes, I just have a couple announcements at the last two slides, but that completes the bulk of my presentation. I'll certainly, stay to answer questions, but you also have, as well as your PowerPoint, invitation letter to this year's Take Back the Night. So for those of you who are not familiar with Take Back the Night, what that is it's an international event. It's been being held here in Oshkosh since the early 90s, and it's just a rally and a march and an event to raise awareness on sexual and domestic violence. So we have made some changes to the event this year. Historically, at least for the last 10 years or so, it's been on campus. But what we've realized in starting to collect some demographic information from our attendees is that only a couple dozen, maybe a few dozen folks out of the 400 that attend are from the community. So students are coming, they get extra credit to come, which is great. It's important they get the message, but we really want to reach the greater Oshkosh community and Winnebago County when we are having this event. So what we have done is we are working with Beckett's, and they've let us use their ballroom space this year. So what I am asking is for you guys to attend. I would love to see you there. If you can't come, please spread the word. It's a great, really important event, and we're really trying to boost the amount of community members that we see there. So we know our numbers will be a little smaller this year, but we're hoping that it'll grow as we move it out into the community space and maybe more accessible to people than going onto campus. And then I have our contact information on here too. If there's anything that we don't cover tonight, please give me a call or give us a call with your questions. If you'd ever want to come in for a tour, I know some folks here have done that already this year, but if you'd ever like to see the place and get shown around, I'd be happy to do that too. So with that, I will take any questions people have, because that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you for that presentation. We'll open it up for questions and comments. I see a number of call-ins. First, we'll start with Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know why our ACEs are so high in Winnebago County as compared to the neighboring counties?
I don't know the reason for that. In fact, what I should have done is look further into that report that I found that graphic from. I will look at that and see if I can find some information, but off the top of my head, I don't know why that is.
I was wondering if it's maybe an economic connection or
Could be.
something like that.
Yeah, it could be, right, or what comes first, right, with the economic connection. But yes, I think that that's probably related to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Defferding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marianne, thank you so much for your presentation, but I would rather think that this is a presentation that you should put in front of the Human Services Board, as well as the Director of Human Services and their department heads. If we look in our budget, Human Services budget, for 2019, there was $19 million of contractual services that the department let out. So that means additional other units like REACH and halfway houses and such. For the last 3 years, I do see that REACH did have contracts in the amount of $25,000, and sometime within the last 2 years, there was a request at budget time for an increase in an allocation to REACH. Now, if your services go beyond child welfare for which the money has been spent, and you have services for behavioral health, I would rather think that you should be approaching Human Services Board and their department heads and apply for additional RFPs that would give you a little bit bigger piece of the pie. We, as a county board, approve and oversee what the departments have managed. We're not micromanaging what they do. And if you are equipped to handle in all of these areas, and there is a need, those contracts will follow the need and the services. So I'm finding it difficult it's a bit incongruent to your request for what you would like us to be more sensitive to.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Please, if you...
I was just going to say thank you. I didn't know if that warranted a response, but I wrote down what you said. Thank you.
Next speaker, Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this presentation, too. And I know that REACH has been very active in NENA, and so I thank you for your efforts thus far. What is your current relationship with the DA's office, specifically with those with mental health conditions that have been charged with a misdemeanor?
Any specific type of misdemeanor or just generally?
Lower level offenses.
Okay. So we work with the DA's office in a couple different ways. Through legal advocacy that I mentioned, we oftentimes are helping victims navigate the system. So that's more on the victim side of things. We'll be working with the prosecutor, helping them communicate with their prosecutor, so on and so forth. For low-level offenses, we do have a diversion program with our trafficking advocate. She works with women who have actually been arrested on prostitution charges, and we'll work with them to rehabilitate rather than have another charge on their record. So it's difficult to find housing, to find jobs, all kinds of things when you're racking up charges. So she works with them on sustainability and self-sufficiency and different things like that. And if they complete that program, then they won't be charged.
Okay. Thank you. Another question is, what is your current relationship with DA's office in regards to like anger management or domestic violence cases? Do you work with counsel those that have been charged?
No, we don't. Not with those specific crimes. We will receive referrals, I believe, from them for sex offenses that are going through the system, but we don't work with DV or the anger management program. Yeah.
And lastly, and this kind of ties into what Supervisor Eisen was talking about, I am looking to expand some diversion programs here within Winnebago County to reduce recidivism and reduce incarceration rates here within Winnebago County. And so what I'd like to see you involved with is these diversion programs are going to be kind of a marriage between Department of Health and Human Services and Judicial and Public Safety Committee. As a way for us to counsel those that may have been charged for lower level offenses, so that they do not get charged again in the future. And that's something that could be a good argument to make in front of the Health and Human Services Board to say that you are saving the county money by reducing recidivism as well.
Okay.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Binder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To directly answer Supervisor Eisen's question, I had, at request, had Lynn Byer, the Executive Director of REACH, and Ms. Radley appeared before the Human Services Board, I believe, in March. And after they gave their presentation, the whole Human Services Board was invited, and most went, along with Supervisor Binder, and we toured REACH Counseling Services office in NENA. To answer the question, Reach Counseling Services, as far as I know, has been given or granted a $25,000 contract or grant for the last 30 years. It has never, ever been upped, where other contracted services have been increased, and I think that's something that should be stopped. When they first came before us, or not, I don't want to say they had a representative who came for the Human Services budget meeting last year, and had an individual that had made the request. We were told, and I was told, that the Human Services Department could handle the great amount of people who needed the services that Reach Counseling Service provides. It's been over a year. I have never, ever seen a report or anything from Dr. Topol. I think that what Reach Counseling Services is a much-needed service. I know Ms. Riley was here to educate us here, and that's why she invited us to take back tonight. But I really think that they offer a much-needed service, and their expertise should be the one that should be doing this in this county. So like I say again, we have had Glenn Byer and Ms. Riley come before the Human Services Board, like I say, I believe it was in March, tour the facilities, and like I say, $25,000, neither the county, Human Service Department, nor Reach Council Service, Glenn Byer, doesn't know when it started, but they've been granted $25,000 from whenever they did it. I think it's 30 years, 20 years, whatever it is. I really think they need a much-needed increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder.
Just say what Mike said. We did tour the facility, and they did give a presentation at the Human Services Board, and they have a beautiful facility. They just remodeled it all. They specialize in basically the abuse, so I talked to Dr. Topol, and he said that we were going to start using them more, and he could see us basically doubling to $25,000. So I don't see why we're not using them more. I mean, that's what they specialize in. It's like if you go see a doctor, you go to your general physician, and he sends you to a specialist. These people deal with this every day, and we ought to be supporting them and basically getting the help to the people that we basically need it so that we can serve the community better. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Just to add on it really quickly, it's pretty simple. I was asked by a supervisor if we could have someone from Reach Counseling Services provide a presentation to the board. I knew that we as a county had been providing some funding over the years. It just made sense to me to apprise the board of some of that information, given they consider some funding for them over the years. So, seeing no other call-ins, I just want to thank Mary Ann Radley for the presentation. Thank you for coming, and thank you very much for what you do.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Moving on down to the next presentation, and that is the 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, otherwise known as the CAFR. For that, we have our Finance Director, Vicki Fitzgerald. And you all should have a printout of some of the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I also have tonight Dave Macau from Clifton Larson, which was formerly Schenck and Associates, and he is our auditor. So I'm going to go over the CAFR and the audited financial statements, but then I'm going to have Dave stand up and speak and just talk about how our audit went this year. So we have a year end of December 31st every year, and we have to have an annual audit. But we also go above and beyond that and put together what we call a comprehensive annual financial report. And sorry about that. Okay, the next page, please. Excellent. So, comprehensive annual financial report we call a CAFR, so we always refer to it as a CAFR. And what that is, it's more of a thorough and detailed presentation of the county's financial condition. It reports on all of our activities and balances for the fiscal year. And like I said, it's not a required report, but it's best practice in government finance to do this report. And within this report, I'll talk about the 3 sections, but is the actual audited financial statements. So every CAFR has 3 sections: the introductory section, financial section, and statistical section. The introductory section, it orients and guides the reader through the report. It has a transmittal letter. It lists all the board members, so you're all listed in there, and the overall table of organization. So it just kind of talks about, this is our county, this is what we do. The second section is the meat of it, the financial section, and it has the county's independent auditor's report from Clifton Larson. It has a management discussion and analysis report, which is basically the whole summary of what happened in our financials altogether. We highlight that, and I gave everyone a copy for that for your enjoyment to read before you go to bed tonight. And but it just really explains our overall financial condition. We also have the basic financial statements, and I'll go over some of those results. The notes to the financial statements. There's also required supplementary information, and we have combining and individual fund statements, and I'll talk about the funds again just to remind you what they are. And then the third section is the statistical section, which I think is the most interesting, and I highly suggest if you don't want to look at any other part, looking at that, because it gives 10 years of data for financial trends, revenue and debt capacity, demographics of our county, economic and operating information within the county. So it really trends out what's been going on in the county, like it trends out our tax rates, what our net position's been, what our largest employers have been, and so forth. So it's a great section just to really get a feel for our county and see the trends. And also, there is a single audit that Clifton Larson comes in and does as well, but they don't include it in the CAFR. And it's an annual audit of our federal assistance money, our federal funds, grants, and awards. And any entity that has over $750,000 of that has to go through this audit, because we are giving assurance to the federal government that we're complying with the rules of what we're supposed to be spending this money on. So the next page, I just wanted to show you where the county's CAFR is, because it's something we don't print and hand out like we do with the budget, because we go through all the budget sessions. But again, you can go out there and find it by going to our website, www.co.winnebago.wi.us. Then on the left side of that page, there's a section of departments. So if you click on the departments, then in the middle of the page, you'll look for the different departments, and you'll find finance, and you'll just click on the blue hyperlink for finance. And then on the left side of our finance page is the CAFR. You'll click on that blue hyperlink, and next slide will show you that our CAFRs are out there. And we have the ones published from 2006 to 2018. So we'll just continue to add to those, so you can go all the way out to 2006 to see what we did. And in the last 2 years, we show the different sections. So if you want to just look at the statistical section or so forth, you can click on that. But then at the bottom, it does also have the full report. And it's probably a good 200-page report, not quite as big as a budget book. So, all right, so then our audit breaks down into basically 2 types of activities. We have our governmental activities and our business type activities. So I'm going to first go over the governmental type activities. And going back to my budget overview for all of you, I'm going to talk about the funds again, because in governmental type activities are the governmental funds. And there's 4 of them. The general fund, which is our basic operating fund that we do most of all of our operations out of. Then we have the special revenue fund, and that fund is intended for a specific purpose of sources of revenue that can only be used for that purpose. And we use that for the Department of Human Services. And we account for all the monies that they bring in, and then at the end of the year, we will zero out that fund's balance and bring it back to the general fund if there is anything left. The next one is the debt service fund, and we use that for the repayment of our debt, of what we bond for. That's where we do the repayment and interest and principal payments. And then lastly is the capital project funds, and that accounts for the construction, rehabilitation, acquisition of capital assets such as building, equipment, roads, and so forth. And just to remind you, that's only for our capital projects that we have. We also have capital outlay in our operating budget for much smaller items, and that is not part of this fund. It's part of the general fund. Next slide. So I just wanted to show you a summary of our governmental activity results. As you see, there's a column for the general fund, one for human services, which is our special revenue fund, and one for our debt, our non-major funds, which is the debt service fund and the capital projects fund. To the right, you'll see that there's totals for 2018 and then a comparative total for 2017, just to give you an idea of where we were a year before. And what I wanted to point out here is that for December of 2018, our change in fund balance is almost $6 million, and our total fund balance is $48,648,955. I will give a breakdown of what that includes on the next slide. So this is all of our fund balances for the governmental type funds. And it's broke down also further. I have the 2018 and the comparative 2017 for you, but it's broke down by non-spendable items that are restricted for certain purposes. And under that, one I wanted to point out was the unspent bond proceeds. That's in the capital fund, and that's what we have bonded for, but we haven't finished those projects yet, and haven't used them up yet. Also under restricted is the debt service, so that debt service fund balance and shows where we would pay our principal and interest out of. Next is our committed fors, and then assigned balances, and then unassigned. And we're all very familiar with the unassigned general fund balance. That's my undesignated general fund balance. I put a big red square around it to show you that's that $28,848,000 that we've been discussing lately that has been building. And the year before it was $25 million. Okay. Next. I wanted to give you a couple of reasons for our surplus this year. The general fund had an increase in the net position of $3.6 million. A big part of that was the Human Services Special Revenue Fund. As I mentioned before, at the year end, we get their fund balance down as close as we can to zero. And they returned $2.9 million to the general fund for 2018. And again, mostly due to excess state reimbursement funds received, and also being under budget in certain areas as well. But the big hitter was the $2.9 million. Also, we had the sheriff's office. They came in quite under budget by $1 million. And some contributors to that were their labor was under by $605,000, but we realized they had a lot lower than anticipated fringe rates, so we have that more in line this year as we were doing the 2020 budget. Their capital outlay, they had $207,000 under budget. That was due to a budget carryover into 2019 for their jail integrator replacement project. And then other operating expenses were under around $235,000. And they came in a lot lower for vehicle repair costs and professional and contracted services. All right, on to the next type of funds. We have proprietary type funds, and there's two types, the enterprise funds and then internal service funds, and I'll go over the enterprise funds first. Enterprise funds are what we call our business type activities because we run it like a business, and we primarily rely on user charges to finance the operations. And we have 4 different funds under the enterprise. We have the airport, solid waste, Parkview Health Center, and the highway. And then, thanks for keeping up with me, Julie. The overall enterprise fund results, I have the income statement here, and you'll see that we actually show it by the different fund, the airport, the solid waste, Parkview, and Highway. Overall, as you can see, the big thing to look at is increase or decrease in net position, and I will explain why some of them were deficits versus surpluses, but the airport showed a deficit of 1.3, solid waste had a surplus of 1.2, and Parkview had a surplus of $537,000, and Highway Department had a deficit of $676,000. In total, if you look at the year-to-date totals and the comparative of 2017, you'll see the net position decreased overall for enterprise funds of $264,000. And then the next page helps to show us the enterprise funds. They're only the unrestricted balances. We showed this comparative in our management discussion analysis report. And so on the top, it shows the 2017 balances for each individual fund, and the next one is the 2018. So the bottom line is if it's got brackets, it's a decline in their unrestricted. Doesn't mean their overall fund balance per se, but for their unrestricted. And then a positive would mean there was growth, which we only see for solid waste. But there are good reasons that I'll show you on the next page that have to do with some of our government principles that we have to follow and show for enterprise funds. So on the next page, I just wanted to kind of touch briefly on each of the different funds. The airport, again, it looked like their unrestricted went quite down. And the main reason was in 2017, they had received $1.5 million from the city for a capital project, and because they're an enterprise fund, we have to show their operations and their capital together. So it was revenue received for capital. But then the majority of the expenses happened in 2018, so the timing between the years was really made it look different. And then secondly, we have a GASB 68, which is Government Accounting Standards Board, comes out with principles, and they started making us show the pension, the WRS pension on our financials. Was that about 4 or 5 years ago? About 4 years ago. And now for an enterprise fund, we have to actually show that in their fund balance. And this year, WRS had a pension asset, and that made us have to restrict some of the fund balance. So for the airport, we restricted $79,000 of it. But the year before, they had a net liability, pension liability, so we didn't have to restrict any fund balance. So it's going to skew it now compared to 4 years ago when we didn't have to worry about that. So then, secondly, that's the airports. So for solid waste, they had a really good year, and it was due to their revenues for the Tri-County waste and recycling programs that exceeded their budget by about $930,000. So that was our main reason for their increase. And then the next page, Parkview, they had revenues come in exceeding their budget by about $426,000. And then they also, the second reason was their main reason, this WRS pension asset that they had to restrict funds for was $1.7 million. So it looks like their unrestricted went down, but it really just has to do with this net pension asset. Hard to explain to people, let me tell you. And then lastly is the Highway Department. The second bullet point again talks about their WRS, and we had to restrict $692,000 for them for that. So that was a big piece. And then the other piece was they put up a salt shed on Highway 10, or they were working on it, and they had approximately $1 million of expenditures in 2018, but then we're not going to get the reimbursement from the state until 2019. And then because they were spending a lot of that already, we had a purchase order out there that restricted $675,000 of their balance for this purchase order for those expenditures. That was a mouthful. All right, on to the second type of proprietary funds is the internal service funds. And what those are, we use them for general services and self-insurance operations. And it's charges that we charge the other departments, and then the revenues, it's an expense to the other departments, and it's a revenue into the internal service fund. And again, like I said, there's the general services, which is where we have our print shop. Like when we print the CAFR, we'll send it there, and it's down in the basement here, actually, and they will print that, or the budget book. And then it's also the mail room. So then her charges go out to all the different departments as well. And then our self-insurance funds are the workers' compensation is self-funded, property and liability insurance, health insurance, and dental insurance. So they all run through these internal service funds. And I just wanted to show you the results of them overall. And it gets broken down again by general services and then self-insurance funds. And overall, we had an increase in net position this year of $1.3 million, and their net position overall is $8 million. And we try to, the fund balances on the self-insurance have been quite healthy. So the last 2 years now, we've actually been using a little bit of the fund balance for workers' comp and health insurance to apply so that we don't have to charge the departments as much in the general fund. So we have given them relief the last 2 years, but we can't count on that continuing. But right now, we're very healthy in those funds. Then overall, I just wanted to talk about long-term debt that we show in our financial notes. And our total outstanding debt at the end of 2018 was $34 million. It decreased by $959,000 approximately, or 0.3% from the year before. So we've been seeing very, very steady with that, and haven't really veered off from that much. We've been staying pretty even. And then the next slide is our capital assets that we show. And just like the long-term debt, it's broke down by governmental and business type assets. And I probably didn't mention the last slide, but these are in thousands, these numbers. But for 2018, we had a total capital assets of approximately $248,000. And that was an increase over year by about $1.9 million. And with that, I can open up for questions. But actually, before I do questions, would you like to talk about the audit? We'll have Dave talk about the audit first, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. Thank you. The audit process really involves us as an audit team working very closely with the county employees. So while we spend a lot of time in the finance area, obviously, it's important to realize that from our perspective, our audit really entails a lot of time in every department. So every department that you just saw, Vicki, go through the various different enterprise funds, human services, et cetera, our audit team actually spends time in the location of the department, working with the team at the department. From our perspective, we believe that to be an effective way to really understand how the county accumulates and manages your operations. So as you saw going through all the financial reports, the county continues to be in a very strong financial position. When you look at your general fund, when you look at your human services fund, you look at your enterprise funds, you're really in a very solid position as you enter the 2019 budget year. So our contribution to the CAFR that you just kind of walked through is really the independent auditor's report that is called opinion on that table on the website. So what we do is we provide assurance as part of our audit. We test transactions, we ensure the county's financial report is properly accounting for all the standards. Like you heard, GASB 68 was new. It did impact your financial reporting, but it's a good thing because it indicated that as of the last time the Wisconsin retirement system had evaluation, the county actually had more assets, your portion, than liabilities associated with the county. So it really is a lot of timing. It is, with any type of pension system, it's heavily driven off the market. What we know in 2017, the market was really strong. 2018's results have not been published yet, so there's a little bit of a lag to that, but certainly indication of a strong benefit package that you're providing to your employees. It means that the Wisconsin retirement is well funded, one of the best funded plans. So our contribution is really the independent auditor's report. We're pleased to say that we did issue an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. What that means is our test of procedures, processes, controls, balances indicated that the CAFR, if you printed it out and reviewed it, we believe accurately reflects the financial position, the results of operations, and the cash flows, and all the appropriate disclosures are in there. It is a very comprehensive, and the word comprehensive is true. It is a long document prepared by the staff here at the county. So our process, the audit team comes out and works with the client, works with your employees. Then we get the financial report provided or prepared by the staff here. We review it, and then it's reviewed by someone independent of the audit team. I would say, or I would commend the staff here at the county. The audit came back with very few changes from second review. We call it second review, having someone look at it. That's really reflective of the strong financial team you have here at the county that's able to produce a document of that size with very little oversight from the audit team and of very high quality. So, I think we're probably not reflecting the actual time. The staff here at the county spend a lot of time not only preparing for us to come on site, but actually preparing your financial reports and do a very good job at accurately reflecting your financial position. So I would certainly commend the staff here at the county on the role they play in preparing your financial statements. The second part of our process is we do issue what we call management communications, where we walk through any issues related to what we call material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in your internal controls. We also spend a lot of time as a governmental entity looking at your compliance with laws or regulations, because if you if you think about it, you're entrusted with the public funds. You saw the capital assets that you're maintaining. I mean, that's the infrastructure that gets the community moving around the community, the roads, the bridges, the buildings we're in. And so all that is entrusted to the county and the county board to manage. So our role is really also to look at controls. Are you doing a good job of managing your resources? And secondly, are you following all the laws and regulations, budgets, tax levy limitations, issuing debt? How do you follow the appropriate state statutes with respect to debt issuance? We're pleased to indicate that we had no deficiencies in internal control related to either financial reporting. You heard a little bit about what we call a single audit. We had no internal controls or compliance items with respect to your federal and state single audit grant awards, which is really reflective of a strong internal control structure throughout the county that you're able to manage. Now, when you step back and you say, what are we managing? From a federal and state perspective, you're receiving about $14 million of state aids and about almost a little over $13 million of federal aids. Now, a lot of that's passed through the state, and we're not talking transportation aids, or we're not talking shared revenues. We're talking grant expended programs where human services, where you're managing the kind of a cost reimbursement basis grants. So if you step back, that's a lot of money that you're managing for federal and state purposes, and we're pleased once again to indicate that we had no deficiencies in compliance with grant laws or internal controls. So, stepping back kind of an overall, we believe the county continues to be well managed in managing your operations. And with that, we'll can entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you. We'll certainly open it up for any questions or comments. I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd first like to commend the finance director on having the online version of the CAFR available before the meeting so supervisors could access that document and understand what it's all about and where it's going. I've got a couple questions here. I'd like to commend you for the enhancement of the management discussion analysis within the CAFR. That's pages 24 to 37. And it is illustrated in the handout. I would be referring to page 30. And what this does, and I think we had some kind of discussion with that some time ago, and I think that you promised me you would refer it at the time of the CAFR and go further through with that. You did make enhancements to the monthly information that we get on the financial reports.
Thank you.
But in particular, if supervisors would look through this, if you take a look at what it says, in particular, say page 31 on the second highlighted area, expenses were less than budgetary estimates. What you have done for us is you have pinpointed exactly in all of the areas of our endeavors, whether we're under budget or over budget or equal budget.
Right.
And that's something which is brand new to the CAFR because I've been following this at least for 12 years. This is kind of a layman's version of what changes have transpired. And it's really, when I saw the change of the name and the enhancement to this, I said, well, you must have gotten a new auditor to do that.
No.
But I see that the 60 partners from Schenck have been enveloped by the Gunderson, the Clifton larger firm. So I'd like to commend you on that. I would like to, in the discussion of the revenues and all of the enhancements from the CAFR, I think there is room for a footnote, and you'd have to decide where that would go.
Okay.
But perhaps in the management discussion and analysis, that Winnebago County does not impose a half-cent sales tax. And when we're looking to where money's coming from and where it's going, it's wholly appropriate because there are only about a half a dozen counties in the state that don't do that 0.5%.
Right.
And when we're going to look over the aspects of next year's finance, the current year's finance, having that margin right there will remind us that things are better than what they look like because we have the potential for imposing that half cent. I would like to also ask you if you could explain the increase over the years of the internal service funds. Are we, by design, charging more back to the different departments? Or is that something which you're paying more for health insurance, so you've got to have to kick in more for all those areas. In particular, I would look back at the 2014, it was $9 million, and this year it was over $12 million. So that was a pretty hefty increase.
Well, first off, I want to go to your question about about the sales tax not having any. A good part for that, where I can add it to, is in the introductory section under the transmittal letter. That's usually a good place for me to put that, so I will definitely add that for next year. And then for the self-insurance funds, I know there was a year, was it 2016? I know, before my time, I know we were self-insured for health insurance, then we weren't, so we took all the money out of there. Now, in 2018, we put $824,000 back in there. I believe that could be some of that issue, as well as health insurance costs have continued to increase year over year. I mean, this year it's going to be at least 6%, other years, last year was 2%, I'm not sure the years before. So I think that's a lot of it is with that, but I'm not sure on the self-insurance part. I might have to look into that.
Well, yeah, I had self-insurance fund to bring to your attention.
Sure.
Where almost $8 million is unrestricted. But that wasn't the concern I had with that other question. I was referring to the internal service funds. Those are the funds that you're charging each of the departments.
But that's where we take care of all the
right.
Self-funded insurance.
Well, it's also where money comes to pay for printing and everything else that services that you provide to the solid waste department for doing their accounting, and what the human resources department charges them for testing a new hire, or whatever those charges would be.
Those don't actually, only general services for printing and mail run through the internal service funds. The other allocations that you're talking about stay right in the general fund, and we allocate from solid waste to the other departments.
Okay. I'd like to note that on page 101, there's a correction.
Let him ask one more question. I see only one other call, and so we'll give him a little more
Okay, there's
time.
a correction that's needed. You have notes on page 101, note number 4, a joint venture for the MEG unit. You identify one of the members as Town of Menasha.
Okay.
And that should be updated to say Village of Fox Crossing.
Great, we'll get that updated.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Albrecht.
Well, I really don't have a question, mainly because I have all the faith in her and her staff.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and close that presentation. Thank you both for your presentation this evening. Okay, moving on to our final presentation this evening, and that's in regards to iPad training and the information systems presentation. I'll call on our information systems director, Patty Francoeur.
All right, sexual assault and financial auditing information is definitely scarier than what I have for you. Yes. Yeah, definitely. All right, the main reason for the agenda item was I was asked to assist any of you who have not yet installed the app that allows you to vote on your device. So this would be the easiest app to use probably on your device, and if you get comfortable with voting that way, it'll have a couple big benefits in that it'll allow Sue not to have to maintain the the clicker system with the batteries and such. And if, again, you get a comfort level, it may lead to you going down the path of increasing uses such as getting your agendas and minutes and the budget book, maybe electronic per diem submittals, general research. You can even look at the CAFR and save tons of paper and postage costs. So the app is a one-time setup. If we get through that, you don't have to do that all again. However, it should be quick and easy, but there might be password obstacles, and if that gets to be too much, our plan A will be to do it together and get it installed. If we have to enact plan B, I might just show you, and we'd have to do one-on-one assistance either after, or again, you calling the help desk, but hopefully we can get through and get more of you utilizing the system. So I'm going to start with the question, how many of you know you do not have the voting app installed? It's Roll Call. That's your system, Roll Call Pro. Who does not? Please raise your hand if you do not have it on your... Okay. All right. For those of you that just raised your hand, how many cannot enter your PIN and get started on your device? Yeah, okay. So we might have, because I'm the only one in the room that can reset your password, so I don't want to necessarily have us sit here and wait for me to do that many resets. Again, if there's 5 or so, do we want to try? Well, the PIN is what I would have to reset. The PIN would be the first thing, and then if we download the app, it would be the Apple ID. Okay. But I thought we could try, and maybe I can enlist a couple of the IS committee members to help once I reset your PIN to make sure people can get in. Do you want to?
How long would that take, you think, for you to do?
Can you raise your hand again if you don't know your PIN? I mean, I have to reset each one by district, and then they have to try to get in, so.
So do you think that would take more than 10 minutes?
Should we just try a couple and see how it goes? And then again, I can just do the show it if.
And the only reason I was thinking is because if it only takes something like 10 minutes, then maybe we'd be able to take a recess for the others that don't necessarily need to have to do the reset.
That would be a good idea.
And then come back together after 10 minutes, and in that 10 minutes, you can do the reset for those individuals. I mean, how does the body feel about that? Supervisor Eisen?
Yeah. With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I think you should probably identify those supervisors or give them an opportunity to identify themselves who don't use the iPad at all. Because I'm aware of one supervisor, but he's not here, that doesn't use the iPad. And so if you're trying to get everybody on the iPad, and there are supervisors that don't use the iPad, that's not going to achieve the final goal. And you're going to burden everybody else with the concerns of the other. Personally, I'm satisfied with the way things are going now, so I'm perfectly satisfied using the clicker, and I'll just leave it at that. I talked enough tonight.
Thank you for your comments. So the goal tonight is the roll call app, though. So that, I think your concern, we can take it at a later date. I'll throw this out as an option. How about if we do this? You'll present how to do the roll call app for those who can get in right now.
Okay.
Then for those individuals who need help with their PIN, we can actually adjourn, and those individuals can get help immediately after the meeting, and she can help with installing the roll call app after that. Does that make sense to the body? I'm seeing a fair number of nodding. So why don't we go ahead and have you demonstrate how to install the roll call app? And then after that, we'll take some questions on it. After that, entertain a motion to adjourn, and the others who need help with the PIN can get the help after that. That make sense? Okay, I'm going to go in order. So first, Supervisor Albrecht?
Well, I was gonna say, I use my own iPad. I just had, the other one was locked up, but I would use this if it wasn't locked up.
Perfect.
I do
So we
use
should-
my own. That's answering Mr. Eisen. I do use my own iPad.
Perfect. And we'll be able to solve that one tonight. Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. All right, Supervisor Finch, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to say is, being an older individual who's not used to this type of a situation, I've called Patty numerous of times, and what I want to say about her and her department, I know how to operate this now. And it's because they took the time, and trust me, all you got to do is give them a call. And I'm not going to say they're going to see you right this minute, but they took the time to show me and do what I should learn, and in front of everybody, I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Supervisor Wingren, anything before she shows the roll call app?
Yeah, I just wonder again, I agree with Mr. Eisen. What is the problem? And why are we coming up with a solution? I think a problem doesn't exist. And, we've got this committee working on something that the problem hasn't been identified. The chair of the committee doesn't even show up tonight. I mean, come on. Why are we doing this? This is silly.
Well, speaking in regards to that, one of the thoughts from the IS committee, and I guess I'm speaking for the IS committee, the thought was to utilize the roll call app would allow people to get a little more comfortable with the iPad, and then perhaps could progress with further utilization of it after that. That's my understanding of their goal. But points well taken, Supervisor Wingren. Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Please proceed.
And I would just like to add before I start that, with all due respect, technology just changes, and we move forward with new systems every day. And at some point, the clickers may not be supported by the company. So it's something that we get driven all the time to move forward with perfectly good systems that we don't want to change either, but we have to. So I'm just putting that out there.
I see one other call, and we'll do Supervisor Bender, and then we'll go to the roll call app, okay?
I just want to say, I do use my iPad to do my per diem, and I stopped down there, and one of your assistants set mine up, and it hooked up there. But ever since I came back from your office, this will not hook up to the internet here. So, and Jim's is the same as mine. I use your iPad to do my per diem. Works great, but I cannot get this app roll to work here.
The roll call app?
Yes, it does not work here.
Okay, it would only work here because it has to connect to the base system. Okay, so we can look at it. But, okay, so
Okay.
I'm gonna just
Please
kind of
go
show
ahead.
you what, that's my dog. Okay, so I'm using my phone, but it's an Apple, and it's gonna be the same basic thing as your iPad device. So when you get to your home page with all your apps, there's the App Store, and so that's where we're gonna go. You click on the A for the App Store. Down in the lower right-hand corner, there's a search. The looking glass, that's kind of the standard search for almost any kind of app. And we're gonna enter in roll call. And it has no space. And it's roll call systems, and then that's the only thing that comes up as an option. So you click that. Has the little red, white, and blue capital type building for the icon. This is just getting the app. So we're going out to the cloud. We're at the Apple Store getting the roll call app. The little cloud with the arrow indicates downloading. So I'm going to click that. And now it's working on downloading the app. And again, this too is all one time. Once you get this set up, you don't have to do it every time. So now that I have the open option, that means it's downloaded. I'm going to open it. And settings is how we tell it what IP address that we have. So we're going to go to settings, and we're going to put in our IP address. its settings is the yellow, it should be highlighted on the side.
What's the password?
That's your Apple ID. Would you want to? So each of you has an Apple ID and password, and Julie can help with. We have those printed out, so we can get you in. We would provide the documentation you need, which also probably you might already have, but the IP address, I just entered in the number. And then this is probably where I'm going to have to stop because I'm not a user of the system, but you guys also have a roll call password and username. They have to do that each time, I assume. And what that does is it allows you to be protected for your vote. Your vote is, this app is set up so each of you has an individual vote. You have to put in your name and password so the system knows who is voting. And that also, the password protects, yeah.
Now, if he does that, and he puts in that password, he goes through it, and he comes back, it says login failed.
Try again. Yeah.
Try again.
Patty, just so we're on the same page, the password that's on that piece of paper, that's if they're having a hard time downloading the app, correct?
Well, that's the Apple ID. If when you try to download it, Apple is saying log in with your Apple ID.
But when they're on the screen that you have there, which these two supervisors are.
That's the roll call one.
It should just be DIST35 is the username.
Yeah.
Not the whole email.
Is it the screen?
You have to download it.
Steve,
You gotta download it.
is it the screen that I'm on? So do you have the IP address in as I do up here?
They do. It's
Okay.
DIST.
This username, yeah, is roll
The
call.
first 4 digits of district.
Okay.
And then the 35. And then.
I don't know.
Nope.
5.
I did.
So it's your
And then in the
district
password,
number,
just
so
do
I don't,
Your last name, make sure that hold on, let me read the email. Password is last name, enter your last name with the first letter capitalized.
and then that's it.
And that's it?
No.
That's all you should have to do
Okay.
to get on the app, then you gotta get into the green.
Okay.
And then log in, and you're good to go. No, hit log in,
Do you remember what I just did?
Yes, I do.
there's a lot of dots there. Can you
Mike,
just delete
you wanna
that?
try to do yours?
I can't hear. Go all the way back and then.
You can't get on it.
And then hit,
Yay!
Could have done it without Steve, no.
and then log in.
Are you locked up?
Before you take off
I don't do this.
Yeah, it's probably a charging thing.
That's why I like decisioning like movies.
I have a different email address for my personal. Use that to get okay.
I've got 4 different emails.
Yeah, I got the county email address. This and then
Oh, okay.
my own personal email.
County, I have the personal, 2 personals, and the town. So I've got 4 email accounts. But then again, on my real computer, the one that's better than shit I have Dashlane, and it remembers things for me. Actually, I don't mind this. You know, when I go to Washington or when I went to Las Vegas, it's all I take. Oh yeah, me too. Yep. Yeah, I hear you.
Do you have? I did, I've got an agenda item.
Once you do get connected and in, it looks like this. And Sue did set up a test item to vote on if we want to go that far, but that's all it takes is you download the app, you get the IP address in there, your roll call login, which is your district and your last name, and then you mark yourself present. And if I do that, I'm going to mark Karen present.